A really good way to know if you're in repression versus regulation is how good are you at identifying and communicating your needs. So another sign of regulation is having enough internal space and capacity to respond rather than react. It is not that. Regulation is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of yourself and your connection to yourself inside of an emotional experience. So this isn't about chasing intensity that just adds to the stress in the body. It's being able to listen to the subtle cues and build that capacity in a manageable way. So all of those feelings are just here to give you information and data, and it's your job to take the time to understand yourself and understand your body, because your body is always communicating with you. Welcome back. I want to speak about nervous system and emotional regulation today, because I see a lot of things online that are either really information heavy and kind of speak to your logical brain, or are promoting a really deep misunderstanding around what it actually means to be regulated and what this means. So we're going to go into the difference between regulation versus repression, what it actually means to control and manage our emotions from an empowered place, and really debunk this idea that I see thrown around, unfortunately, by people with quite large platforms around this concept of stop trying to regulate yourself all of the time. So let's start there. I've seen this post go around many times over the years, and it's people saying, stop trying to regulate yourself all of the time. We want to be regulating ourselves. What they actually mean, because I understand the premise behind it, but there's a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge and awareness there. What they're actually trying to say is stop repressing your feelings and calling it regulation. We have the term regulation for a reason, and I want you to leave feeling really empowered around that and understanding that that doesn't mean to repress yourself or keep yourself calm or anything like that. And it's actually about authenticity. It's about the fullest expression. It's about the natural flow of your feelings, but then how to work with that in an empowering way. So you're not repressed, but you're also not driven by your emotions and out of control or being destructive around what you're feeling and projecting it outwards. So let's talk about the difference between repression versus regulation. So repression is going to be things like shutting down your emotions before they have been fully felt, disconnecting from your felt body and sensation. And we're going to go into more depth around what the felt body is and how to connect to it today in this episode. Repression is also going numb, feeling flat, blank, stuck in your head, so overly cognitive or overly rigid and controlling of our feelings and our environment. Repression is also suppressed anger, suppressed grief, suppressed fear, suppressed needs, and suppressed hurt. A really good way to know if you're in repression versus regulation is how good are you at identifying and communicating your needs. Firstly, how good are you at identifying your needs and meeting them for yourself? And then how good are you at not just meeting those needs, but then communicating that effectively inside of relationship. So if you are falling further into the repression category, then you will be disconnected from those needs, disconnected from those feelings. Another sign of repression is performing and pretending to be okay, or being cool, or being nonchalant, or being unaffected while the body is affected, while you are feeling something different to what you're actually expressing or communicating. So then regulation is being able to stay present with what is moving through you. It's being able to stay present with the sensations, the feelings, and the experiences that you're having at any given moment. It's being able to feel emotion without becoming overly attached to it, meaning regulation is the ability to allow emotion and feeling to move through your body. Regulation is also allowing activation to move without letting it run your behavior. And this is crucial. I'm going to talk more about how you can cultivate more of that today. Regulation is also remaining connected to your body, to your breath, to your sense of self, so your self-awareness, and your choice. This is crucial inside of regulation versus repression. Is choice online? If you feel you have choice over how you show up, how you behave, the actions you take, the words you speak, when choice is online, you are most likely relatively regulated. If you are repressed or dysregulated, so you are outside of what you can handle, what you can hold, or you are repressing it and shutting it down and trying to control it, you are going to feel disempowered and there's going to be a lack of choice that feels clear or at least supportive to you. You can have enough clarity of choice to say, this is how I need to move, or this is how I need to take care of myself or meet my needs, or there's options and there's choice in the matter, rather than you feeling really repressed, really shut down, or things are really black and white, like you're inside of a wound. So another sign of regulation is having enough internal space and capacity to respond rather than react. And a crucial part of that is choice online. You are reactive when choice has gone offline. You can respond only when choice is available. So repression moves you away from an experience, whereas regulation keeps you inside of the experience and allows you to navigate it. So you can imagine what is going to be more empowering is the regulation. So I can remain inside of this experience, even if it's activating. And the more I'm regulated, the more capacity I have. So, for example, repression is going to say, I'm not angry, whereas regulation is going to say, I can feel anger rising and I'm going to stay with it and with the experience without letting it derail me, without letting it take me over and dictate my actions or my choices in an unhealthy way. Repression is also going to say, it's fine, I don't care, it doesn't bother me. Whereas regulation is going to say, this has affected me. I can really acknowledge and feel that. And let me stay connected to myself. Let me stay grounded with those feelings while I meet that experience. And again, make choice, decide what is the next best move for me. So this concept that we see floating around not regulating yourself all the time suggests that people are linking regulation with an absence of emotion. It is not that. Regulation is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of yourself and your connection to yourself inside of an emotional experience. So I think this is a really good time to talk about the emotional curve. So how emotions are experienced in a rather, a relatively simplistic way that we can digest and understand, so you can have more empowerment around your emotions and how they move through the body. So I want you to imagine your emotions like a wave. They begin just like the rest of the ocean. They're just part of the ocean. You're an ocean of feeling. And then something in your environment is going to trigger a response. And when I say trigger, I don't want you to think of like a negative experience necessarily. I just want to say there is a trigger. There is something that is going to trigger a series of events that is resulting in an emotional response in your body. So some sort of sensory input, something happened that causes an emotion to increase or surge. And that's when the wave starts to increase. So emotions aren't static. They're not just always there. They're not just there in one repetitive state. They are coming in, they are intensifying, and then they will get to a peak. And if we're able to stay with this, they're going to then dissipate and they're going to return to the ocean. They're going to alchemize back into the ocean. So really key thing here is to understand is that your emotions go back into the web of feeling, but they become something else. There's two options. An emotion comes in and it doesn't get to complete. So it gets stuck somewhere along that curve due to the capacity of your body, what is happening within your nervous system, the space that you have. So it's either going to get interrupted and stuck and repressed from moving through that process, which means it's going to remain on a loop, trying to resolve itself. And you're going to keep having these similar experiences that feel like Groundhog Day around feeling the same way, the same anger, the same hurt, and it's going to keep coming up and keep coming up and keep coming up. Or you're going to have enough capacity to integrate it and move it through, whereby that emotion becomes something more useful. It alchemizes into something else. And this is something I'm going to talk more about today in terms of that emotion is going to be something that you can then alchemize into something constructive rather than destructive. So an emotion that is allowed to move, allowed to complete, allowed to be fluid, resolves itself in terms of it has a purpose and it moves through and it is able to be used in a healthy, constructive way that helps you to grow inside of your life, inside of your relationships. Now, because a lot of people don't have the capacity, or a lot of the time we don't have the capacity to feel those emotions all the time, we get this negative spin on emotions, that emotions are bad. So a lot of the time when we don't have the capacity, because a lot of people don't have that capacity for the full emotional curve, there is stagnation in the body, there is contraction in the body, there is tension, there is conditioning, there's a lack of space, there's a lack of support. We get a negative relationship with emotion in our culture. We think emotions are bad, and they can be really destructive when they're not channeled effectively, but they're also part of your human experience. So when we see them being destructive, then we can swing to the other end, which is repression. And if you repress something for long enough, it just explodes and becomes destructive, whether that is outwardly destructive or whether internally becomes destructive to your health. So, or both, a combination of both. So we neither want to be in repression or the projection and the unhealthy expression of them. We want to create the space for them to actually become something that is constructive. And there's no hard and fast, there's no rule book around this. It's about you learning how to connect with those emotional experiences, how to listen, and how to start to take action or bring them to your lived experience in a way that creates something better. That's always what we're looking for. Has this destroyed or severed connection to myself and other people in some way? Or has it somehow been used in an empowering way to improve upon that connection? So these emotions aren't static. They're going to move in these waves. They're going to rise, they're going to peak, and they're going to resolve when they are actually met. They won't resolve. They'll get stuck on a loop when there's not enough space. And we're going to talk today about what that space actually looks like and how you can create more of it. So we're often conditioned to interrupt the full spectrum of that feeling and that sensation way too early. And so then, like we said, we get repression, or we discharge it impulsively, or we just dissociate and leave our body when the intensity arises because it's too much. So let's talk about a couple of things that are going to block the wave. It's just the way we grew up, how much space, how much emotional attunement there was. That's just going to dictate what emotions we feel are okay and what ones we don't feel are okay, or what amount of emotion is okay and what amount of numbing and repression or impulsivity is okay. That is going to be reflected in your relationship with your emotions. Other things that tend to block that wave are a fear of intensity that we have either inherited through our conditioning, or it has come through trauma in terms of, I don't want to feel this experience again because I had a negative experience with this feeling. And so I'm going to shut it down. A lack of internal capacity, so a lack of space, a lack of resource in the body and the nervous system. Like we've said, shame around emotions, different emotions, or kind of really all of our emotions to some degree. Trying to control the way others perceive us causes repression of feeling, repression of emotion, lack of capacity or scarcity in the nervous system. So scarcity is another way just to say there's a lack of capacity, a lack of resource, a lack of space. And like we've already said, past experiences where those emotions, those feelings weren't okay to feel. So a really important note to mention here is the goal is not to indulge every emotion and act it all out and get really caught up in our emotional surges. It's the ability to witness and pay attention to and remain steady enough as possible inside of the wave of emotion, knowing that the intensity will pass if we actually have the capacity to breathe through it, to be with it, and to stay until it starts to move in and become something actually constructive that we can work with. So the wave is only going to become dangerous when you've never learned how to surf it. You've never learned how to ride that wave, and therefore those emotions then become destructive. So a good lesson for us all. So let's just talk about dysregulation, what it is, how you can relate to it in a really tangible way. And it just means that regulation sits within, say you've got 3 circles. So you've got a smaller circle in the middle, then another circle around it that's a little bit bigger, and then another circle around that that's a little bit bigger again. In that center circle, that smaller circle, is your comfort zone. And this is where I think people get confused. Let's just say that that's where you're really comfortable, you're not really overly challenged, things feel familiar, and you're not being stretched. Then you're going to go into that bit of a bigger circle, which let's say that's 10 to 15% bigger than the comfort circle. And that's going to be your stretchy zone. You're now in your capacity is being stretched. You're now building your internal capacity by stretching your relationship with resource. And that is, you could call that an element of dysregulation. You could say, I'm no longer in my comfort zone, so I am slightly dysregulated. However, it is just a relationship with stress. So how much stress you are adding is just relative to how well you can still stay in connection with yourself, how well you can still meet your needs, and how well and effectively you can integrate that stress afterwards so that it becomes part of your comfort zone. So your comfort zone, then that circle then expands to include another 10%, another 15%, as long as it's integrated. That third circle that was sitting right on the outside, the third circle that we drew or imagined, is now dysregulation. meaning I've gone past my stretchy zone. I've lost connection with myself, and I've now either numbed out, collapsed, or I am impulsively spilling my emotions on and around the people around me. So now I've lost connection with myself. This is the key part. Has connection been maintained or has it been lost? Again, no hard and fast rules around this. This is all just wisdom that we learn and grow into. Inside of your stretchy zone, inside of that second circle, you can maintain connection. It might feel hard. There might be intensity. There might be stress. You might feel tested and challenged. Once you're outside it, that's what I would call dysregulation. As you can start to see, this is all relative to how much capacity is in the inner circle, how much resource is in that inner circle, what is included in the baseline of your comfort zone, and then also how well and how conscious are you around stretching that capacity and integrating it in a way that you can consistently grow. So you're understanding that each time you stretch, you also have to integrate that. Every time you inhale, you have to exhale. Every time you build more capacity, you have to digest it. So that's really, really important. So dysregulation marries up with scarcity. If there's not enough resource in that internal circle to live a modern life or to maintain an existence in modern society or in modern culture, if you weren't given a lot of resource to begin with, and there wasn't a sense of ease within that initial comfort zone, you may have been living inside of dysregulation most of your life or all of your life, or have to live outside of that comfort zone, live inside of dysregulation in order to just survive. And this is what I would call a survival state. You're living inside of survival, meaning there's not enough resource to match up with the demands and the stress that are upon you. So it's all just a relationship thing. Do I have the capacity to meet my needs relative to the stress and the demands that I'm putting on myself and my body? So if you grew up in a situation where you felt like there wasn't enough time, there wasn't enough support, there was some form of neglect, whether minor or more severe, there wasn't enough space, there wasn't enough rest, there wasn't enough relational security, there wasn't enough internal resource. This is all going to contribute to the amount that you're going to have in that internal circle, which is then going to contribute to the amount of dysregulation that you're going to experience. So that when the body is living in scarcity, even those small things can feel really huge. This is why it's not about the circumstances or what somebody is experiencing. Like I was saying, it's not a trigger to somebody else that sends them into dysregulation. Could be a trigger to another person that just elicits a normal emotional response that they can easily stay regulated inside of. It's all relative to the amount of capacity, amount of resource that exists, and the amount of capacity and resource that you are actively building. So a low capacity system is going to experience normal life as much more of a threat. There's going to be a lot more fear because there's going to be a lot more scarcity, and there's going to be a sense of there being a lot less support and resource to actually move through life in a way where you feel like you can hold yourself or that your needs will be met. Whereas a resourced system can meet challenge without it feeling overwhelming and without collapsing. So super, super important to understand that it's all just a relationship, and we're all experiencing different relationships with resource and capacity. So let's talk about the felt body in case this is new to you. This will be really important. If it's not new to you, there'll be new bits or bits that deepen your awareness here. So let's get into it. We've spoken about the felt body in this teaching today, and your felt body essentially is just your ability to connect with and interpret your feelings. These are just sensations and ways that your body, your nervous system, your internal world is communicating with you around how it's interpreting stimuli, what your needs are. The better your relationship is with your felt body, the more emotionally attuned you're going to be, and the better and more effective you're going to be at interpreting what those signals are communicating with you and how to meet those needs so those signals don't become destructive or intensify. And what I mean by this is your body is communicating what it needs, not only to survive, but to thrive. So if you're meeting things at a survival level, like you're just meeting them, then you're going to feel like you're in a survival state because you're kind of doing the bare minimum. You've been taught to just do the bare minimum. But the other symptoms, just like I was saying, the other sensations, the other ways your body is communicating with you don't go away. Your body is still communicating its needs, but they just intensify into tension, disease, imbalances, all of this stuff. So that is an unmet need that you now need to start listening to, start tracking back, and start actually tending to. So if you were meeting the bare minimum, you're going to have more of those body-mind issues, more of those things presenting. If you are then going a bit deeper and you are giving yourself more space, more time to listen, you're really going in there and paying attention, you are going to be able to meet deeper needs, which means you're going to have more capacity, more regulation, more ability to meet more of life because your needs are met at a deeper level and you've got deeper emotional attunement and you're actually listening. So for you to regulate your emotions or feel regulated and for you to feel empowered around your capacity, to feel more abundant around your capacity, to feel more deeply connected in your relationships, to thrive more in every area of your life, that connection to your felt body is crucial. The deeper you go with that, the better. Because you can't regulate an emotion or regulate your nervous system without being able to feel your breath, for instance. You can't communicate what you are experiencing with somebody else to facilitate a better relationship if you don't know how to label a feeling, a need, a sensation, or an emotion. And so if you are disconnected in this way, what is often going to happen is you're just going to be in that survival state, which means you only notice things when they become intense. Like I said before, you're going to miss the subtle signs and you're just kind of doing, and I'm not meaning to be offensive here when I say the bare minimum. I'm sure you're putting in tons of effort with the capacity that you have, but in terms of what your body maybe needs for where you want to go, you might be breadcrumbing it, let's say, just for the example of this situation. And so your body is used to having to intensify things to get your attention. You haven't yet learned to listen to the subtle signs, and there's been scarcity, so there's not enough space and not enough time, not enough support for you to take that time to actually listen and interpret and start to meet some of those deeper needs to get you out of those loops of just breadcrumbing yourself and meeting the bare minimum of what's there and actually start to go deeper with that. So there has to be more time given, there has to be more investment for you to get out of that loop of only meeting things when they actually get intense and being able to notice the subtleties. When you are meeting needs through subtle communication, life becomes so much more peaceful, so much more easeful. Your relationships become secure. all of those things become the norm because you're not waiting for things to escalate. You're not waiting for things to become intense, and you're not needing that intensity and those extremes in order to pay attention, because you are paying attention at a much subtler point in the process. So the other thing to note is that inside of that, when there's intensity, and that's when you're starting to notice things rather than before, you're noticing things when you're already flooded. You're noticing things when you're already reactive. You're noticing things when you're already shut down or withdrawn or frozen or overwhelmed, rather than noticing the pattern of it and how to track it back and get it and meet your needs at a much, much earlier stage. So the felt body, just to do a quick rundown, it's everything from being able to label your feelings to just being able to meet needs on a basic level, like I am hungry. You would be shocked to know how many people are truly disconnected from that. When you think about the prevalence of eating disorders, how we're disconnected from like our sense of fullness, and we like overeat or undereat. And again, it's not an exact science to this, but the way that we misinterpret these signals is crazy important in this landscape and in understanding what is going on within the health of society. So being able to understand when you're hungry, when you're full, when you need to rest, when you need to move your body, when you need to feel something is moving through you, when you want to be close to someone, or when you need to set boundaries with people that you don't want to be around. We're usually so disconnected from all of this stuff, and this is why we're so chronically severed from our authenticity and from our truth. It's also being able to notice tension, notice contraction, notice heat or heat rising through the body or pressure. It's being able to say, oh, I've got a tight chest here, or notice the quality of your breath, or is my jaw clenched or not? Do I feel nauseous? And also, do I have an urge to move away from this or towards this? What are all these experiences that I'm having? So everything just from your basic biological functions through to deeper emotional attunement. And so this is how you're going to understand that these feelings and emotions aren't about being dramatic. This is the way your body is communicating with you. Yes, I believe we are like nature in that sometimes there are storms. Sometimes there's an intensity in the weather that just is part of the season that we are in. But that doesn't mean that storm or those seasons or those emotional experiences are disconnected from the genuine purpose of what we're doing and where we're going. So we need to be connected to ourselves. It doesn't mean there isn't big waves of grief, or it doesn't mean we aren't really frustrated about certain things. That's part of what makes us human. But can we stay connected to there's a purpose around that, and I can remain in a loving relationship to the best of my ability with those experiences as they move through. So all of those feelings are just here to give you information and data, and it's your job to take the time to understand yourself and understand your body, because your body is always communicating with you. It's always telling you the truth. It's always telling you what it needs to heal. It's always showing you the way. It really just needs time, space, and attention. If you think about the things that you were craving growing up that you didn't have, that would resolve so many of the things that you're looking for, it's usually just time, space, presence, validation. So really at the core of what we are all craving, and you need to start giving that to yourself. So let's talk about how we actually build capacity in the nervous system. So like we've said, you've got your comfort circle, you've got your stretchy circle, and then you've got your dysregulation circle. So you can imagine you're moving between the comfort circle and the stretchy circle. And I want you to think if you've ever watched a time lapse of a flower blooming. So, a flower is going to expand and then it's going to contract and it's going to expand and it's going to contract. It's going to do this and it's going to keep growing until it comes into full bloom. So this is like your center circle and that stretchy circle. You're going to expand and then integrate. So you might expand out 15% and then you integrate back and you're going to come back about 5%, something like that. So you've stretched 10%. And then you're going to do that again, like with every breath. As you inhale, the lungs expand. And as you exhale, the lungs soften and contract. So you're doing this and you are experiencing a stress to the system and you're expanding your capacity. And then you're softening and you're allowing yourself to be and you are integrating. This is the cosmic relationship between yin and yang, the active versus the being, the integration, the passive. Everything has this relationship. So you're just learning how to harness it to a greater extent. So capacity is built gradually. It's not built by like overexposure to stress over a long period of time that never gets integrated. It's not just forcing your body into situations that it can't digest. And it's also not avoiding stress and collapsing out of fear. So your capacity is going to grow through secure contact with intensity that is manageable, that you can integrate. And life is stressful enough, the amount of stress that people put themselves under, usually because there's so little capacity and they're looking to feel something. They're so disconnected from the subtle feelings of our experience. And so looking for intensity all of the time. So this isn't about chasing intensity that just adds to the stress in the body. It's being able to listen to the subtle cues and build that capacity in a manageable way. What I want to say about this is there's no perfect in this, in terms of you might go through a really, really stressful period where they just feel like there's not enough time, not enough support. That's just the season you're in. In order to integrate that, you'll have to have a season of being quieter, of conserving energy. It's like the winter is going to follow the summer. It's going to come after. You're going to go through these, like the spring and the summer, and then you're going to start to descend into autumn and winter and start to integrate some of that intensity. So all stress can be integrated and turned into something constructive and something healthy if you give yourself enough time, space, and attention to actually integrate and digest it and be with it. That's why so many people are walking around with digestive issues, because we're not actually taking the time to digest our lived experience. And instead, we're living in a chronically overwhelmed state. So I believe collectively, we've been in that summer period and we are starting to go more into a descent period collectively, energetically, where we're starting to now digest this big boom, all of this creation, all of the industrial revolution, and just like we've kind of been on this hamster wheel of doing, and we're starting to come more into an integration period. But that involves meeting the shadow, meeting what we haven't tended to, looking at the quality of the earth, looking at the quality of our health, and actually really addressing these things. And so that relationship between the action, the stress, and the integration is like a titration. It's like I'm going to take a little bit of that, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a pause, and I'm going to integrate it. So that is a titration. It's like we're doing things in digestible chunks. So titration just means that we are touching a bit of intensity, then returning to that comfort zone or that window of tolerance. So stretch a little, and then settle or feel a bit more, and then integrate. So it's like active participation and then recovery. So capacity grows through that exposure to even just noticing sensations earlier, staying with emotion for a few seconds longer, breathing without disconnecting and abandoning the breath, naming a truth or expressing a truth in the moment builds capacity. Orienting to what we can tolerate versus what we can't builds capacity. All of these awareness pieces start to build capacity, as well as the action we take in life that stretches us, that challenges us. So all of that is going to help build your capacity, as well as reducing too much stress and making life feel less chronically overloaded. That's also going to build your capacity. Resting well is going to build your capacity. Nourishing yourself is going to build your capacity. So I'm going to leave it there, but let's close it on this note, in that understanding that regulation and repression are not the same thing, but you're going to go on your own journey of understanding how to regulate more of your experience, how to feel more of your experiences without running from them, without collapsing under them, and without projecting them outwards. Emotions move in waves. It's your job to take responsibility for your feelings, your experiences, and to build the capacity to hold more of that wave so it becomes something that helps your relationships and your life grow and evolve, rather than severs it or keeps you inside of these repeating loops of conflict or disruption that seem like they never resolve. Your relationship with your felt body is essential and crucial. The deeper you go with that, better. Dysregulation is usually just a relationship thing in terms of, is there enough capacity to meet the demands of what life has in store? It's not a personal failure. It's just a capacity issue. Regulation is built through titration. Imagine it like the breath. Imagine it like those circles that you have. Imagine it like a time lapse of a flower coming into full bloom, and understand that stress is necessary. It's your relationship with it. It's nothing is either negative or positive. It's completely up to you. If it's too much, it's going to become something that feels negative to you, but that's just a relationship with the capacity that you currently hold in your system. So if you've spent years calling a freeze state or shutdown strength, or you felt overwhelmed by emotions that keep derailing certain parts of your life, or you can't seem to understand how to move beyond certain conflicts or certain repeating feelings in your life and relationships, this episode is going to help you make so much more sense of that. And if you want to go deeper into this inside of your relationships and start to resolve unhealthy relationship cycles and patterns, you can click the link below in the show notes to get started.